Welcome back, friends. Now that you have looked at the 10 guiding principles and the 6 supportive principles in NMT infrastructure design, let us now focus at the design of pedestrian facilities in particular. In this lecture, we will give you an overview of the design guidelines as per IRC 103 published in 2012 and look at how you can design for effective sidewalk width and also provide for seamless pedestrian travel. So, what IRC 103 tells us is that pedestrian design should be as per different zones. So, there is a zoning system that helps us understand or helps us design good pedestrian infrastructure. So, what is this zoning system? The zoning system tells us that as a sidewalk, for example, this is the entire say sidewalk, right. This sidewalk is divided into a frontage zone, a pedestrian zone and a furniture zone, right. So, there are 3 different zones: a frontage zone, a pedestrian zone and a furniture zone, and then comes the right of way or the carriageway, where you have maybe on street parking and then you have lanes for vehicles to move along. So, what do you mean by a frontage zone? Frontage zone accommodates the entrance to any property, for example, entrance to a shop. So, maybe there is an entrance to a shop where there are clothes hanging in the shop, and that zone is called a frontage zone, which usually is anywhere between half a meter to 1 meter, right, of your entire footpath. Next comes the furniture zone, which is on the other edge of the sidewalk. In the furniture zone, all utilities like street poles, sitting arrangements, etc., should be provided, right. So, everybody, you have benches here, people are sitting on the benches, there are trees, all of those such areas should be demarcated from the actual walking zone. So, the pedestrian zone IRC says or recommends that should be at least a minimum of 1.8 meters. So, that depends upon what type of area you are in, but it says no less than 1.8 meter clear pedestrian zone, right. A frontage zone should be different and a furniture zone should be different. So, that is what is called the zoning system for a footpath or a sidewalk as per IRC. So, here is a good example of the effect of zoning. So, this is an unplanned picture, right. You do not know where the pedestrian zone is, you do not know where should people walk, should people then end up walking on the carriageway or on the pavement. Whereas, if you have planned it in a proper manner, now you have demarcated the pedestrian zone. You have the frontage zone, you have your shops here, people can sit along the shops, do their business along the shops. There is a furniture zone where all the trees are and so on and so forth, and there is a clear pedestrian zone. So, this is how you should design for a sidewalk when you are looking at any urban area in India. So, this is as per IRC. All the image sources images are taken from ITDP, and ITDP usually refers to IRC. You will see that we have interchangeably used IRC and ITDP. ITDP we have used for the images, whereas IRC is the primary document that tells us what these zones are about. Now, it also says that the width of the sidewalk depends upon which area you are talking about, or which area, it again says which zone you are talking about. So, when you are in a residential zone or in residential area, what IRC recommends is that you have at least 0.5 meter of your frontage, which will not in a residential area, because there are not many stores or shops or anything, you do not require a whole lot of space for your frontage zone. Have at least 1.8 meter of pedestrian zone, and then you have a furniture zone of at least 1 meter. So, a total width of at least 3.3 meter that we are talking about, right. So, when you see very narrow footpaths, you should always question them, you should always talk to your urban local bodies and say that do not provide us anything less than 3.3 meters in front of my residence if you really are serious about people who would walk, right. There is no point just providing them with a 1.5 meter pedestrian zone. That will not help them, because then you will not have any trees alongside it, or the trees will be in the middle of the pedestrian zone, which will affect your movement, and then you will not feel comfortable while walking, and that will result in you not taking very many walking trips, right. So, that is what IRC says about the residential zone. Similarly, for the commercial zone, what it says is that now your frontage should be increased to at least 1 meter, because there will be a lot of activity along your frontage, especially because you are in a commercial zone, and your pedestrian zone should be wider as well. Now, lots of people will be walking there or buying, doing their shopping, coming in and out of stores. So, the pedestrian activity will be greater, hence there is a wider space required to accommodate them. Also, a little bit wider furniture zone should also be provided, now that maybe you have to provide dustbins, seating, so on and so forth. So, there should be wider furniture zone, and a total width of at least 5 meter should be provided, right. So, when you go from a residential zone to a commercial zone, you see that your width of your sidewalk increases from 3.3 to 5 meters. Finally, if you are at a very high intensity commercial zone, for example, you are in the central business district. So, when you are in the central business district, what happens is that your pedestrian zone increases to 4 meters. So, you have to really provide for wide sidewalks, so that people feel comfortable while they are walking, and more people do actually walk rather than use their motorized two wheelers or four wheelers. Then a total width of at least 6.5 meters is recommended. So, you will see that in many of the large metropolitan areas in their CBDs, you would see actually much wider sidewalks than when compared to smaller commercial zones or even residential areas. So, this type of a situation has to be avoided, where you see that there is no demarcation between the pedestrian zone and the frontage zone as well as the furniture zone. Everybody is kind of intermingling in this area. So, this causes not only congestion for the motorized vehicles, but it gives an unsafe walking and bicycling environment, and as a result the number of people trying to walk or bicycle will always reduce. So, this type of a situation where this Toto does not have any designated parking, it stops anywhere it wishes to stop, all such things should be avoided. If you look at IRC and try to determine the level of service, what it also says is that a minimum clear width, again I think we have already explained to you about the clear width. A minimum clear width of pedestrian access route shall be 1220 millimeter exclusive of the width of the curve, right. At least that much width should be given, and then if people are walking in both directions, then if you see that if you provide a minimum sidewalk width of 1.8, your number of people per hour should not be greater than 1350 if you want to maintain a level of service B, or if you want to maintain a level of service C, you can go up to 1890 people per hour if you only provide the minimum, right. The minimum is 1.8. However, if you can go up to 4 meters, then you can accommodate a whole lot of people by still maintaining a level of service B. Similarly, this column shows you if it is a unidirectional, if it is only in one direction, then you can have even more people, right. If it is multidirectional, then it remember it provides friction between people moving up and down. So, the usually the flow or the capacity reduces. Similarly, based on land use, again we have already seen that via pictures. What it says is that if it is residential, you have to provide at least 1.8 meter width. Again, when we are saying 1.8 meter width, remember it is the pedestrian zone that we are talking about. In addition to the pedestrian zone, you always have to have your frontage zone as well as your furniture zone. So, in residential areas, minimum footpath width of 1.8 meter, whereas in high commercial intensity zones, high intensity commercial zones, you have to have at least 4 meter of footpath. The next is once you have catered to the width of the footpath, you also have to look at the height or the height of the curb or the height of the footpath. See, sometimes in many cities you would see that the footpath is very high when compared to the carriageway. But what IRC says is that it should not be any more than 150 millimeters high. This is what IRC recommends, right. What this, there are multiple other design failures which we will get to here, but what IRC says is that if you have such a high width of footpath, what is likely to happen is that if there is a motor vehicle that is plying on the edge of the road here, that may hit this raised sidewalk and then it may topple over into the pedestrian zone, right. If it is a smaller, if it is a lower footpath, the chances of toppling of vehicles is less. The chance of toppling of vehicles is less, and that is why this is a much safer sidewalk height to have. The other design issues we will get to in a minute. So, let us now take you to an example to determine how do you determine to in order for you to determine the width that is necessary as per the number of people or the flow of pedestrians in your area. So, say for example, there is a 2 meter wide ideal footpath, i.e. no obstructions around a transport terminal with a wall on one side and is barricaded by guardrail on the other side. The existing peak flow rate is 1800 pedestrians per 15 minutes. You are first asked to estimate the present level of service. Secondly, what will be the widening requirement to maintain the service quality at level of service C. So, once you know the present level of service, do you have to widen it to maintain a level of service C? You are told that use the INDO-HCM 2016 method. So, we have already given you examples of couple of problems of how to determine level of service based on INDO-HCM 2016. So, we will use the same standard table that tells you about the different levels of service for different land uses, right. So, if you remember this, you remember the 6 steps of developing a level of service. The first one is identification of the land use, which we are told is a terminal land use, width of the sidewalk, which we have told is 2 meter width. The next step is to determine the effective width, and if you may remember, effective width is given by what all obstacles it has on both sides. So, here it has guardrails on both sides and guardrail on one side and wall on both on the other side. So, a shy distance of 0.4 to 0.6 meter in both cases. So, in that if you just subtract the shy width shy distance, you will get the effective width as 1 meter. Once you know the effective width, you are also given the pedestrian flow, which is peak flow is 1800 pedestrians per 15 minute. So, that will be 120 pedestrians per minute, and for in order to know the rate, again you, because it is only 1 meter effective width. So, that will be the same 120 pedestrians per meter per minute. Now, that you know that pedestrian flow rate is 120 pedestrians per meter per minute, and it is a terminal land use. So, for terminal land use, anything it is not even between 68 to 78, that means it falls in the category of F. It is a variable pedestrian flow rate. Anything greater than 78 is a variable pedestrian flow rate. So, you see that your pedestrian, sidewalk currently is at a level of service F. So, now the second part of the question is, what do you have to do, or how much do you have to widen it by in order for it to maintain a level of service C, right. So, now in order for it to maintain a level of service C for a terminal land use, you know that it has to fall, or the flow rate has to be anywhere between 26 to 32 pedestrians per meter per minute. So, if you assume, let us assume on the higher end, say that we will accommodate 30 pedestrians per meter per minute. So, now you know that how much should be the effective width. You already know that your flow rate is this much, or 120 pedestrians per minute. 120 pedestrians per minute divided by the flow rate of the footpath, which is 30, it gives you the effective width of the sidewalk. So, the effective width of the sidewalk should be 4 meters in order for you to maintain a level of service C in a terminal land use. Now, if your effective width is 4 meter, considering a shy distance of 1, so you should have at least a 5 meter wide footpath. So, how much do you have to widen it by? You already have 2 meter footpath. So, you have to widen it by 3 meter. So, this is a very easy way for you to understand what is the deficiency of your pedestrian infrastructure in your neighborhood, in your any different types of land uses, and once you know the deficiency, you can then advise as to what can be done to overcome that deficiency. So, if you say if the urban local bodies now know that, well, in order to maintain a level of service C, which is ideally what everybody would like to maintain it at, we would have to at least widen the footpath by 3 more meters in that particular terminal land use zone, so that people feel comfortable while walking. So, that is a good example of how to measure what is the width that is necessary in order to maintain a certain level of service. Now, the other aspect that is highlighted in IRC 1003 is the cross slope. The cross slope is very essential, because when silt accumulates after rain, it may cause the sidewalks to be slippery. So, puddles can cause the footpath to become slippery. So, there has to be always a running slope as well as a cross slope, and as per IRC, the running slope should be no more than 5% and the cross slope should be no more than 2%. So, you have to ensure that your sidewalks are designed in such a manner. Next comes the surface quality, right. This is often our pet peeve when we are looking at different types of pedestrian infrastructure in our urban areas. We always many a times find such a facility which is extremely unusable for pedestrians. It is always recommended that while you are designing for pedestrian facilities, remember NMT users, we have to include you have to provide for universal accessibility. So, you have to take into account the specially abled as well as children and elderly people. So, when you are developing any surface quality, you have to have your universal accessible design, and you have to make sure that there is a clear space for pedestrians to walk along the footpath. Surface quality, when we talk about, we either look at paver tiles, sandblasted checkered tiles, or non-skid tiles. So, all of this, what they allow you to do is to walk on it, walk on the surface without the fear of slipping. So, that is one of the fears while you walk on any surface, is that during rain or any other cleaning of the surface, it should not become slippery. So, these are examples of different types of surface quality that can be provided along your urban pedestrian facilities. The next most important thing is, how do you deal with property entrances, right? How do you design for property entrances in order to provide seamless pedestrian travel. Many times you will be encountering such a situation, right. So, here is your right of way, here is a entrance to a residential building or to a commercial building, and so what happens is this footpath ends here and again starts back up here to provide for direct access to the motorcycle or to the motor vehicle, right. But this is not taking into account that there are a lot of people walking on those footpaths. So, why should we not provide them with a seamless entry as well. So, what essentially sometimes what people do is they provide such kind of a sloping such kind of slopes at property entrances. Lowering the entire footpath to the level of the carriageway is unacceptable, as property entrances may become waterlogged. So, this is also not a right design to provide, because now you are since the slope is this way and this is upslope. So, there may be lot of water accumulation at this point, and the property owners here would not like it. Instead, what has to be done is there has to be a small slope up here provided for the vehicles, and also the footpath should be continuous, right. The footpath should be continuous here. There should be a small upslope that allows people to enter to access their home or property, and in this manner both the pedestrians and the vehicles are accommodated. So, this is the right way where vehicle ramps should be provided in the furniture zone. Again, this is the furniture zone, right. There is a clear pedestrian zone. So, in the furniture zone vehicle ramps are provided, which goes up, and then the vehicles can access the properties, keeping in mind the pedestrians walking on them. So, this provides seamless walking platform for the pedestrians, rather than having them get off here, then get up here and do all kinds of things. So, you have to always remember, keep in mind, property entrances we want to provide vehicular access, but we want to provide vehicular access not at the cost of the pedestrians walking alongside on the sidewalks. We have to consider both the pedestrians as well as the vehicles while we are designing for property entrances. So, here is an example like I was talking earlier in one of the pictures. Not only is the height of this footpath not as per design, but also several property entrances are along the way, and every time there is discontinuous sidewalk. So, this people you would often see that you would end up with such a situation where people are walking alongside the sidewalk, because this is an uncomfortable situation where pedestrian has to get down, again get up, again get down and get up. So, there are so many breaks in the sidewalks that the pedestrian decides that I might as well just walk alongside the sidewalk and not use it at all. So, such kind of design should be avoided. Here again lot of parking on the footpath, right. So, although there is a wide footpath here, but it is completely encroached upon by parked vehicles. So, this is the proper design of for property entrances. From the vehicle, from the pavement, from the right of way, you have a upslope in the furniture zone, and then there is a clear pedestrian zone. After the upslope, the vehicle can then slowly go ahead and access this. So, this I believe any of the new smart cities that are looking at developing pedestrian infrastructure are keeping this in mind while they are developing or while they are designing for property entrances. Next is vending area. So, when you try to provide seamless pedestrian travel, vending area always almost becomes an obstacle, right. We should not now always think that these vendors should be rehabilitated or taken away from here, because vending is their livelihood. So, when we say that they should be rehabilitated. The situation is very complex. Rather than making the situation complex and uncomfortable for the vendors, we should design in such a way that the vendors are also incorporated into your pedestrian, into your footpath. At the same time, there is a clear pedestrian walking zone as well, right. This sort of a situation where the vendors have completely encroached is not desirable, and the pedestrians then start walking on the pavement. This side is not desirable, whereas this type of a situation where you have the frontage zone and you have the furniture zone here, and you have a clear pedestrian zone or a walking space. That is something you have to be you have to design for such a situation and not for such a situation. The similar things is shown in this picture as well. Vending spaces should be placed in a bulb out in the parking lane or in the furniture zone, leaving clear space for pedestrian movement, right. You can, if this is the furniture zone, you can have the vending zones right here, leaving a clear space for the pedestrians. Similarly, where you have bus shelters, right, that is a bus stop or a bus stop that has bus shelters. How do you design for seamless pedestrian travel? If you have the bus stop right here, so if the bus shelter is right here, then people who do not want to go to the bus shelter, who are just looking to walk past it, now do not have a clear path. It is not a seamless travel. Now they have to either get down and then get back up, or they have to be troubled by all the people that are waiting for the bus here. So, it does not provide for a seamless transfer. So, what has to be done is the bus stop is already available, but the footpath has to be extended towards the left. Now, this provides a clear walking path for the pedestrians who do not want to access the bus stop, and also people who want to access the bus stop can now easily go here and allow a clear path. So, that is how seamless pedestrian travel should be ensured near bus shelters. Similarly, if there is parking, this is the situation when there is no on street parking. When there is on street parking, you have to make sure that if the bus length is such long, you have to ensure that the bus at least has direct access to the bus shelter, right. If the bus does not, it cannot squeeze in to this space, then what will happen is people will start getting off here. This is again a pavement area and then go to the bus shelter. So, nobody will be waiting at the bus shelter, everybody will come on the pavement and start waiting, right. So, instead this sidewalk has to be now extended, outward, provide a bus shelter. It still remains a through access for pedestrians who do not want to access the bus, and then there is parking alongside, right. So, this situation, this situation should be avoided because the bus is not coming all the way here, or the parking bus shelter has not been extended all the way here. Now, people are ended up on the pavement trying to use the or trying to access the bus. Instead, you should have the curb extended outwards, so that now people can directly access the bus from the sidewalk itself and not go on to the pavement. So, that brings us to the end of this lecture, where we have given you some examples of how to design for pedestrian facilities in urban areas and ensure that there is seamless access to the pedestrians. These are some of the references that we have used. The pictures have also some of the pictures have been taken from a previous NPTEL course, which you should also be looking at if you are in depth, if you need an in depth understanding of traffic engineering principles. For this, we have also given you an understanding of how width plays an important role in keeping up with the level of service criteria of pedestrian facilities, and how you can redesign your pedestrian facilities in order to maintain a certain level of service. Remember, again, in a nutshell, pedestrian design is governed by zoning, which is based on land use. Thank you very much for your attention.